Perfect.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just share my screen quickly and then we'll get on with the presentation. Oh, one more. Fantastic. Can everyone see the presentation I've got going?
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. There's a little bit of lag on this call, might be my end, so bear with me. Perfect. So we've all introduced ourselves from Earthwatch. A little bit about Earthwatch and the tiny forests. I think quite a few of you guys are tree keepers or already involved in the forest in some way, but don't worry if this is the first you're hearing about it, because there's plenty to get involved with. So Earthwatch is an environmental charity with citizen science at its heart, and it's got a range of environmentally focused projects going at the moment, from planting trees, which is the Tiny Forest project, to monitoring water quality all over the UK. So the first tiny forests were planted in 2020 in the UK, and now Earthwatch has 149 tiny forests all over the place. So it's really taken off. And the original idea for tiny forests came from this Japanese scientist in the 70s called Miyawaki. So that's what they're based on. One sec, just move on the slide. Come on. Sorry, my computer's having a bit of a moment. What are you doing? There we go. So today we're going to give a bit more background on the tiny forests, and then we're going to talk about Carbon Week, which is a week-long period to send people out to go and monitor the tiny forests and to measure some trees. So, and then we'll talk about how to get involved with Carbon Week and our method for measuring the trees and more resources which are available to you. So, a tiny forest is a very dense, fast-growing native woodland, which is approximately 200 metres squared. So in this 200 metre square area, we plant 600 trees. So that really is quite a dense wooded area. And this is following the Miyawaki method, where if we plant trees very densely, then they will hopefully grow up quicker than kind of traditional planting methods would. And the tiny forest is, as well as the obvious benefits for nature and biodiversity, it's also combined with a public engagement programme so that we can provide social benefits to being in nature, and we also get schools involved as well. So some of the research that we do in tiny forests is the carbon storage potential, which is the focus of Carbon Week. So this is measuring how much carbon the trees are storing in them. So how much carbon dioxide, which can have a bit quite small in this context, but impact on climate change. We also look at flood management, because forested areas are much better at absorbing water from rainfall, and so less likely to flood nearby areas. And also the effect on biodiversity. So we do some biodiversity surveys as well, looking at both pollinators and ground dwellers for how they're using the forest. And the final benefit of a tiny forest is there's this thing called the urban heat island effect, where urban areas, just due to all the concrete and tarmac, are a few degrees warmer than they would be if they were sort of forested and natural areas. So planting trees in urban areas can actually cool them down, which I'm sure due to recent heat wave we're all quite aware of at the moment. But today we're just going to be focusing on the carbon storage aspect. So this is a tiny forest I was at last week. This is one in Derby. So as you can see, it's doing pretty well. And despite the recent heat wave, the trees are also looking pretty good. Cute little oak tree there. So a bit more about Carbon Week. It's towards the end of September from the 17th to the 25th, and it's a week-long citizen science event, and it's across all of the tiny forests, the 149 tiny forests that are across the UK. So this will be sending people like yourselves out to collect data independently and then feed it into our portal so that we can use this for our ongoing research to monitor the effects of the tiny forest, the positive effects that the tiny forests have. And anyone can be involved. So once you've done this training, feel free to, get family members, friends involved, other kind of local community groups. You literally only need a ruler and a tape measure to do it. So it really can be quite, it's quite accessible. So how to get involved. I'll give a brief overview of how to get involved, but then I'll dive more into it, a bit more depth in later slides. So first of all, you need to find your local tiny forest, or if you're really keen, multiple tiny forests. So if you're already tree keepers, you'll probably know kind of roughly where the forests are. But if you're not tree keepers, don't worry, we have a very handy interactive map that will show you. And then all you need to go and measure the trees is a tape measure and a ruler, or calipers if you have them, but really a tape measure and a ruler will do the trick. And we encourage you to share the event and try and get others involved too. Basically, spread the word. So I'll take you to our interactive map to show you how that works. So if you go to our main tiny forest site, you'll come across this interactive map. So as you can see, it is all over the UK, and you can zoom in to a specific area to see where the tiny forests are. So I'll go to Oxford just to demonstrate. So you can see there's 3 forests in Oxford, the little tree symbols, and then there's also one out in Witney over here. So from there you can find your nearest tiny forest. And then if you want to find out more information about each tiny forest, you can just click Explore Tiny Forests. So during Carbon Week, when you get onto this page, there will be a direct link to where you input the surveys. But for the moment, it just tells you a bunch of information about the forest near you. But like I said, once Carbon Week is active, there will be a direct link to a survey that looks like this. So I will quickly show you how to get onto the survey. It's quite self-explanatory if you just type your full name, and I'll get to tree tags in a moment, but I'll quickly show you the survey. So that takes you onto here, and then this is the information that you'll be filling out about the trees in your tiny forests, all on here. So let's nip back to the presentation. So I'm going to quickly run through the method of how to measure trees in the tiny forest. So first of all, you need to find a tree which has a number tag on it, and they normally look like this. So how we tag trees in the forest is out of the 600 trees we plant, we tag 100 of those trees, so that we don't end up having to measure 600 trees, because that will take an awful long time. So this is proportional representation of the trees in the forest. So first of all, question that it will ask you is your study tree dead or alive? So sometimes they look like twigs and they look kind of dead, but if you just gently scrape some of the bark off with your nail, if it's green underneath, the tree is still alive. If it's completely woody, no green at all, then it's likely that tree is dead. So on the survey, just tick the tree is dead and submit, and then it will submit that tree as no longer being alive. And the next thing you need to do, if your tree isn't dead, is to determine the species of the tree. So when you're on the portal, it will ask you, is the species assigned to this tree incorrect? So up here, it says your study tree is an alder, and you just need to use either tree species guides if you have them, or I use an app on my phone called Seek, which you can put your camera towards the tree and it will tell you which species that tree is. So if it's incorrect, you can tick incorrect, and then it will give you a drop-down menu of the other species in the forest that it could be. They're all here. That just lets us know that it was tagged incorrectly, because sometimes on planting days, things got quite hectic, so tags might have ended up on the wrong trees. So it's good to know if it's right or not. So for the next step, it will sometimes ask you on the surveys whereabouts in the forest the tree is. So the tree is defined as being in the middle area of the forest if it's more than 2 meters away from the edge of the forest and 2 meters away from the classroom area. So you can see this little diagram here. Middle is this light green patch here, and it's defined as being at the edge of the forest if it's within 2 meters of the outside fence or within 2 meters of the classroom area. So what we've got to do now is measure the tree from its base to its highest point, the highest alive point, that is. If there's a branch which is dead on top, then you just measure to the nearest green point. So you measure the height of the tree using your tape measure from the base. Sometimes there's a bit of buildup of mulch around the bottom of the tree, so you scrape this back ever so gently to find where the tree actually meets the soil, and then measure the height of the tree from the base to the highest point that's alive. Once you've make sure when you're finished with the tree, you do scrape the mulch back over, just because it needs to kind of keep the tree cozy. So, and then you can input that onto the survey as well into this box here. How tall is your selected study tree? And that's in centimeters. This helpful diagram here shows you. The next thing you need to do is determine if your tree is a single stem or a multi-stem tree. So sometimes some of the shrub layer, like dog rose, will have multiple stems coming out of the soil. So this is defined as a multi-stemmed tree. And if it's got a single stem coming up, but then branches coming out further up, that's still a single stem tree. It's only multi-stem if the branches are actually coming out separately from the ground. And during Carbon Week, there will be an option to say how many stems your tree has. Once you've determined if it's a multi-stem or a single stem tree, you need to measure 10 centimeters up from the ground on your tree, and then measure the width of the tree, either using calipers or a ruler, just to sight across the tree and see how wide it is. And then this needs to be put into the portal in millimeters in this box here. If the tree has more than one stem, like it's a multi-stem tree, then you need to measure all of the stems up to 5 of them. If it's more than 5, then just measure the 5 widest stems that you have. And it doesn't matter if you're using a ruler or calipers for this, both will work. And one final thing to do before you move on to another tree is sometimes the tree tags, the little labels on there, were tied on quite tight at planting, and the trees have started to grow around them and they've started to constrict the tree's growth. So if at all possible, just undo the tie slightly and loosen it and then do it up again. Or you can hang it on a higher up branch if the tree is getting quite large, just because you don't want that tag to end up restricting its growth later on. So there's a list of useful resources that we have, including a protocol of what I've just gone through. Oh yeah, once you've done this, just go down and make sure you press submit, and then you can move on to the next tree. And this is where you put the tree tag in once you've identified which tree it is at the start. This protocol sheet, which will be available, also talks this through. So you can look at that when you're out there. And on top of this page, also during Carbon Week, there will be an option to click to get the protocol up on the screen, so that if you're halfway through a tree, you can quickly glance at that and then carry on. So, right, on each Tiny Forest profile that you go onto, there will be, when it loads, this is what it looks like. And there's a resources section, which has all of the survey guides. So you can look down here and it will be on the carbon storage guide. And that's the guide I just showed you, if you do want to download it or print it off for any reason. Also on this section are monitoring sheets. So again, if you go down to here, this is a data sheet. So if your phone can't access the internet, or there isn't much signal where you are, or sometimes if you're doing it with young children, it's quite good to fill in this sheet, and this asks all the same questions as the survey. So you can fill in the sheet and then you can submit it onto the portal on a computer later on. So that can be quite helpful. And that also has the different, it also has the different species list which are in that forest as well. And during Carbon Week, this will all be accessible without a Tiny Forest login like you would have if you're a tree keeper. Sorry, I just need to let some more people into the waiting room. So yeah, there's the field sheets and the guides, and also the tree species list, which again, if you are out there without your phone, or you're not doing it on your phone, you can always print off the tree species list beforehand so that you know which species to expect in the forest. And these are the recommended mobile apps for tree identification. I personally use Seek, but Picturevis is also very good. So that is a very quick run through of the method for doing the carbon surveys. There are other science days and events throughout the year which will be happening at your local tiny forests. There will be planting days as well for new tiny forests. So keep an eye out for those. And yeah, feel free to encourage friends and family. It's great to get the kids out doing this as well, get them doing some science. And if you aren't already a tree keeper and you're interested in becoming a tree keeper for a specific forest, then you can talk to my colleague Divya, who is on the call. So I think I will stop recording there, and I will ask any questions. Ask if there's any questions, and free to ask me, Divya, or Louise, anything that might come up. Thank you very much.